Why do you feel the need to save people who are drowning in their own lives, even when it costs you your peace, your energy, and sometimes your future? Think about that question carefully, because if you are honest, you'll realize this urge didn't come from nowhere. It came from empathy, from strength, from a deep belief that if you try hard enough, love enough, or sacrifice enough, you can change someone's life. You believe that your effort can be the turning point in their story, and that belief feels noble. It feels meaningful. It makes you feel important, needed, alive. But here is the uncomfortable truth most people never face. Not everyone who is drowning wants to be rescued. Some are not drowning at all. They are floating comfortably in chaos, pain, and excuses while you exhaust yourself trying to pull them to shore. Have you ever noticed how the people who try to save everyone are often the ones who end up broken? That is not an accident. Psychology tells us that helpers, fixers, and saviors often confuse responsibility with worth. Somewhere along the way, you learned that being valuable means being useful, that love must be proven through sacrifice, that walking away means you failed. So you stay, you carry, you fight battles that were never yours to fight. This is where the illusion begins. The illusion that you are strong because you endure. The illusion that patience alone will change people. The illusion that your pain has meaning simply because it was endured for someone else. But strength is not about how much you can tolerate. Strength is about knowing what deserves your energy and what will destroy it. Here is something few people will ever tell you. Saving the wrong people will slowly train your mind to accept suffering as normal. It rewires your nervous system to stay alert, anxious, and responsible. You start living in a constant state of tension, waiting for the next crisis, the next emotional collapse, the next problem you need to fix. And over time, you stop asking a very important question: who is saving me? The savior mindset often feels heroic at first. You feel needed. You feel chosen. You feel like the one person who understands them. But psychology shows that this dynamic is rarely about love. It is about control, fear, and identity. You fear being abandoned, so you attach yourself to people who cannot stand on their own. You fear being ordinary, so you become indispensable. You fear emptiness, so you fill your life with other people's problems. And the cost is always the same. Your dreams get postponed. Your growth slows down. Your emotional health deteriorates quietly. You become tired in a way sleep cannot fix. Because it is not physical exhaustion. It is soul exhaustion. Here is a hard question most people avoid. If someone truly wanted to change, would they need to be saved over and over again? Or would they take responsibility for their own life? This is where wisdom begins. Wisdom is not cold. Wisdom is not heartless. Wisdom is clarity. Wisdom understands that real change comes from within, not from rescue. No amount of love can replace self-responsibility. No amount of sacrifice can replace personal effort. And no amount of patience can force growth on someone who refuses it. When you try to save people who are not ready, you interfere with their lessons. Pain is often the teacher they need, not the enemy you need to remove. By constantly rescuing them, you delay their growth and accelerate your own burnout. This is not kindness. This is self-betrayal disguised as compassion. And here is something empowering you must hear. Walking away does not mean you lack empathy. It means you respect reality. It means you understand that your energy is not unlimited, that your time is sacred, that your life has a direction, and that not everyone deserves a front row seat in your journey. If you stay with this message until the end, you will gain something rare. You will gain clarity. Clarity about who deserves your effort and who does not. Clarity that will save you years of emotional pain. Clarity that will protect your energy, your focus, and your future. Because once you see the patterns clearly, you can never unsee them. This is not about becoming selfish. This is about becoming conscious, about choosing strength over guilt, about realizing that you were never meant to carry everyone. Some people must learn to walk alone before they can walk beside you. And this is only the beginning. Once you understand that not everyone wants to be saved, a clearer pattern begins to emerge. Certain people are not held back by lack of opportunity or support. They are held back by one thing alone: refusal to take responsibility for their own lives. And this is where many strong, empathetic people lose years of their energy without realizing it. These individuals often speak the language of hardship. They talk about unfair parents, a cruel world, bad luck, broken systems, and missed chances. And at first, their stories sound convincing. Pain is real. Struggle is real. But listen closely, and you will notice something missing. Ownership. There is always a reason, always an excuse, always someone else to blame. Responsibility never enters the conversation. Psychology explains this clearly. When someone avoids responsibility, they protect their ego. Taking responsibility means admitting weakness, mistakes, and poor choices. It means facing discomfort. Growth demands humility, and many people would rather stay stuck than face that inner discomfort. So they create a story where they are always the victim and never the cause. Here is where the trap forms. When you try to save these people, you unintentionally reinforce their mindset. Every time you step in, you confirm their belief that someone else will carry the weight. Every time you fix their problem, you delay their maturity. You become the external brain they refuse to develop themselves. These people often appear helpless, but helplessness can be learned. Over time, they stop trying because someone else always tries for them. And that someone is usually you. You give advice. You offer solutions. You sacrifice time. You invest emotionally. Yet nothing changes. Not because your help is ineffective, but because help without responsibility produces dependence, not growth. And this is the painful realization many never reach. You cannot carry someone who refuses to walk. You cannot lift someone who will not stand. And you cannot save someone who is committed to avoiding accountability. Look closely at how these dynamics affect you. You begin to feel frustrated, yet guilty for feeling frustrated. You feel drained, yet ashamed for wanting distance. You feel stuck, yet responsible for their outcome. This emotional conflict creates chronic stress. It keeps your mind in a constant state of tension, always trying to fix what is not yours to fix. There is a powerful truth hidden here. Responsibility is the foundation of change. Without it, motivation collapses, discipline disappears, and growth becomes impossible. No external force can replace internal ownership. No savior can substitute self-respect. When you stop saving people who refuse responsibility, something remarkable happens. You reclaim your power. You stop negotiating with excuses. You stop confusing compassion with self-destruction. You begin to see clearly who is willing to grow and who is committed to staying the same. This does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop carrying. It means you allow people to face the consequences of their choices, because consequences are often the only language that creates transformation. Pain becomes the teacher when comfort fails. And as you release this burden, you create space. Space for your own goals, your own healing, your own discipline, your own life. You begin to understand that your role is not to rescue, but to respect the boundary between support and sacrifice. Some people will never change until the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the fear of change. And that pain cannot be removed by you. It must be felt by them. When you accept this, you step into a higher level of strength. Not the strength of endurance, but the strength of discernment. And that strength will protect you from one of the most exhausting traps in life: trying to save those who refuse to save themselves. Once you stop carrying the weight of people who refuse responsibility, another pattern becomes impossible to ignore. There are individuals who are not stuck because life is hard, but because they are addicted to chaos. Disorder gives them purpose. Drama gives them identity. And without turmoil, they feel empty. These people often claim they want peace, but their actions reveal the opposite. When things finally become calm, they grow restless. They create conflict where none exists. They provoke arguments. They reopen old wounds. Psychology explains this as emotional conditioning. When someone grows up in instability, chaos becomes familiar, and the mind mistakes familiarity for safety. For them, calm feels unnatural, silence feels threatening, stability feels like loss of control, so they sabotage it. Not consciously, but instinctively. Chaos gives them something to react to. It keeps them feeling alive. And when you enter their world, you become part of that storm. Trying to save someone like this is one of the fastest ways to lose yourself. You begin adjusting your behavior to prevent their explosions. You walk on eggshells. You monitor your words. You sacrifice your peace to keep the environment stable, not realizing you are feeding the very disorder you are trying to fix. These people often pull others into emotional loops. Today they need comfort. Tomorrow they need reassurance. The next day they need conflict. Nothing ever settles. There is no resolution, only repetition. And slowly, your nervous system adapts to their chaos. You live in a state of alert, waiting for the next emotional wave to hit. Here is the dangerous part. Over time, chaos becomes normalized. You forget what peace feels like. You mistake emotional intensity for connection. You believe that constant ups and downs mean passion, loyalty, or depth. But psychology shows something different. True connection feels safe. It feels grounded. It feels steady. Chaos is not depth. It is dysregulation. You cannot heal someone who feeds on instability. Your calm will threaten them. Your boundaries will frustrate them. Your growth will expose their stagnation. And instead of rising with you, they will try to pull you back into familiar disorder. This is where many people lose years of their lives. They believe love means enduring turbulence. They believe loyalty means staying in emotional storms. They believe strength means tolerating instability. But real strength is choosing peace over intensity. It is choosing clarity over confusion. It is choosing growth over drama. When you stop engaging with chaotic people, guilt often appears. You may feel like you are abandoning them. But the truth is, you are abandoning a pattern, not a person. A pattern that consumes energy without producing progress. A pattern that keeps both of you stuck. Chaos-driven individuals can only change when they learn to sit with silence. When they learn to tolerate calm without creating conflict. That lesson cannot be taught by saving them. It can only be learned through discomfort, through facing the emptiness they avoid. And here is the shift that changes everything. You are not responsible for regulating someone else's emotions. You are not required to absorb their instability. You are not meant to live in survival mode for the sake of someone else's comfort. When you choose peace, your mind sharpens, your focus returns. Your energy stabilizes. You begin to build a life that is not constantly interrupted by emotional emergencies. And in that space you grow. Let this truth settle deeply. Your peace is not boring. It is powerful. Your calm is not weakness. It is mastery. And anyone who cannot exist without chaos is not meant to walk with you into a stable future. Walking away from chaos is not abandonment. It is alignment. Alignment with a life that does not require you to be in constant emotional defense. And once you experience that kind of peace, you will never again mistake chaos for connection. When you step away from chaos, something subtle but equally draining becomes clear. There are people who do not create storms, yet they slowly empty you. They listen. They nod. They promise change. They ask for guidance again and again. But nothing ever moves forward. These are the ones who drain without transforming. At first, they seem sincere. They talk about growth. They ask deep questions. They appear self-aware. And this is why they are so deceptive to your energy. Because effort feels like progress, even when no action follows. Your mind registers movement, but reality remains frozen. Psychology explains this pattern as passive dependence. These individuals use conversation as a substitute for change. Talking about growth gives them emotional relief without requiring discipline. Advice becomes a comfort blanket. Insight becomes entertainment. And you become the source of motivation they refuse to generate within themselves. Every time they come to you, you give, you explain, you encourage. You believe that clarity will finally unlock action. But clarity without commitment does not create transformation. It creates stagnation with good intentions. Over time, you begin to notice the pattern, the same problems, the same complaints, the same fears, the same excuses dressed in different words. Weeks turn into months, months into years, and nothing changes except your level of exhaustion. This is where many people confuse patience with progress. They believe staying supportive will eventually lead to movement. But growth is not a matter of time. It is a matter of choice. And no amount of emotional investment can replace the moment someone decides to act. There is a psychological cost to staying in this loop. You begin to feel responsible for outcomes that are not yours. You question whether you explained things well enough. You wonder if you could have been more motivating. You internalize their stagnation as your failure, and that quiet self-blame erodes confidence. Here is the truth that restores your power. People who want to change move, even imperfectly. They stumble forward, they take uncomfortable steps. People who only want comfort stay exactly where they are, while consuming the energy of those around them. You are not a fuel station for unfulfilled potential. You are not meant to be an emotional charger for people who refuse to walk their own path. Support is meant to assist action, not replace it. Guidance is meant to sharpen effort, not excuse inaction. When you stop feeding this dynamic, resistance appears. They may say you have changed. They may say you are less available. They may say you are no longer supportive. But what they are truly reacting to is the loss of easy emotional supply. This is where self-respect takes form. You learn to measure people by behavior, not promises, by movement, not intention, by consistency, not conversation. And this shift protects you from one of the most subtle forms of emotional drain. Let this idea sink in deeply. Your energy is a resource. Where you invest it determines what grows. If you keep pouring into people who never move, you stagnate with them. If you redirect that energy toward your own discipline, goals, and evolution, your life accelerates. Some people only grow when they lose access to constant reassurance, when silence replaces advice, when consequences replace comfort. That space forces them to confront themselves, and that confrontation is where real change begins. Choosing not to save these people is not cruelty, it is clarity. It is understanding that transformation requires friction, and by stepping back, you allow that friction to exist. When you finally release the need to push others forward, you move forward yourself. And that is the moment your life begins to feel lighter, cleaner, and more aligned with who you are becoming. When you stop trying to rescue everyone, guilt is usually the last enemy to appear. It whispers quietly at first. It tells you that you are being selfish, that you are abandoning people, that your strength has turned into coldness. And if you do not understand this moment, guilt will pull you back into the same patterns you worked so hard to escape. Guilt is powerful because it disguises itself as morality. It makes you believe that self-sacrifice is always virtuous and boundaries are always cruel. But psychology reveals something deeper. Guilt often appears when you break an old identity. An identity built on being needed, being relied on, being the one who stays when others leave. When you stop saving people, you are not just changing behavior. You are changing who you believe you are, and the mind resists that shift. It prefers familiar pain over unfamiliar freedom. So guilt arises as a defense mechanism, trying to pull you back into what feels known. Here is the truth that dissolves that guilt. You were never meant to be responsible for outcomes you cannot control. You were never meant to carry lessons that belong to others. And you were never meant to shrink your life so someone else could avoid growing. Strength is not measured by how much you endure for others. Strength is measured by how clearly you choose what aligns with your values, your future, and your mental health. Walking away from destructive patterns is not betrayal. It is self-respect in action. Many people fear that choosing themselves will make them alone. But what actually happens is something far more powerful. You create space. Space for people who meet you with effort, not excuses. Space for relationships that are reciprocal, not draining. Space for growth that is not constantly interrupted by emotional emergencies. When you choose strength over guilt, you stop negotiating with your own limits. You stop explaining your boundaries to people who benefit from you having none. You stop apologizing for protecting your peace. And in that silence, clarity grows. There is a psychological shift that happens here. You begin to trust yourself again. You listen to discomfort as information, not something to suppress. You recognize patterns early instead of waiting for damage. And this self-trust becomes the foundation of confidence. Some people will not understand your boundaries. Some will label you as distant or changed. Let them. Growth always looks like betrayal to those who benefited from your self-neglect. Their reaction is not proof that you are wrong. It is proof that the dynamic has shifted. Here is a powerful realization to carry forward. You do not owe access to your energy just because you once gave it freely. You are allowed to evolve. You are allowed to outgrow roles that kept you small. You are allowed to choose a future that does not require constant emotional sacrifice. Let go of the belief that your worth comes from saving others. Your worth is inherent. It does not need to be earned through exhaustion. When you internalize this, you stop chasing validation through suffering. Choosing strength means accepting that some people will only grow without you. And that is not a failure. That is alignment. You are not closing your heart. You are refining it. As you move forward, remember this. Your life is not a rescue mission. It is a creation. And every time you protect your energy, your focus, and your peace, you invest in something that truly matters. You do not become powerful by carrying everyone. You become powerful by standing firmly in who you are, without guilt, without apology, and without the need to save those who must learn to save themselves.